What is the flavor that just says Femme Hot Girl Summer inspired by Miss Leah Chase?
Kiano, Moju, owner of Jaconi, and we're actually here in one of our kitchen studio sets where I'm going to show you how to make mandazi. Mandazi is an East African donut, kind of like an American beignet, but it's filled with coconut milk and cardamom and lots of great spices, but it's also incredibly easy to make. So to start off, I have a nice big old bowl of all-purpose flour, and I'm going to spice it up a little bit. So first thing is a bit of sugar for some sweetness. And my spices, I'm using cardamom and a little bit of cinnamon. I think cinnamon always has a place next to cardamom, but cardamom is definitely the key flavor here. And for leavening, I'm adding a bit of baking powder. These can be made as a yeasted donut, but that takes a long time. This is definitely the quick version of that. And some salt, just to make all the flavors taste more like themselves. This is definitely a recipe that I like to make in the morning. I really just love baking. Baking is one of the earliest things I actually made. When I was really young, my mom got me a toy oven, an easy bake oven, if you grew up with it. And I made cakes like it was my job. I would make so many little cakes and brownies and be so proud of it. And that's when my mom was like, all right, listen, if you're gonna be feeding me dessert all the time, you're gonna learn how to cook proper. And that's when she put me into class at age 7. So baking is definitely still one of my favorite things to do. But not gonna use the big boy oven. But today we're actually gonna deep fry these, which is also nice that not all desserts have to go in the oven. This is easy baking. So flour is all mixed together and I have to add in the liquid. But to give the liquid a little bit of space, I'm gonna actually create a little well in the center. And that way, you have a designated spot to go. Make it nice and easy to mix together. So for the liquid, I'm using coconut milk, full fat coconut milk. Coconut milk, to me, is such a quintessential ingredient in like coastal Kenyan cuisine. Coastal Kenyan food is very tropical. You know, there's mango, there's papaya, pineapple, all that good stuff. And I love tropical ingredients. I think they're the most delicious, most flavorful. There's always like a slight sweetness to them. And they honestly make every meal feel like a little bit of a vacation. So that's not a bad thing. Because this can be made using water, but the coconut milk has so much more flavor. It has some fat in it too. So it's gonna create like a light, really creamy donut. And to that, I'm gonna add 1 egg. The egg is gonna help bind it together. Also, the egg yolk adds more fat, but these can be made plant-based. You're just gonna add a little bit more coconut milk if you wanna forego the egg in yours. But I like it this way. This recipe is really a great testament to like how I think home cooking should be. Really quick and easy. This is made with stuff I always have lying around the house. And a lot of the work that I do as a food video producer is really thinking about what do people have? And thinking of recipes not just as something for entertainment, but understanding that these are things that are actually, you know, nourishing us and feeding ourselves, our friends, our family. And there shouldn't be a lot of hurdles to do that. So I really enjoy making recipes and food content so when I'm thinking about the recipes I want to shoot for my work, be it a recipe that I made or working with someone else to share one of their recipes, approachability is still really important. Approachability doesn't necessarily mean that we're cooking generic food, but it's understanding that every food can be everyday food and every culture has their own version of everyday food, and really focusing and highlighting that, because I think for a lot of cuisines, especially African cuisines, a lot of the food gets put in that occasion category of like, oh, we'll have it once in the blue moon or once a year, where, I mean, all over the world, people are cooking meals for their friends and family every day. And so I really like to find what those everyday recipes are and show them to other people so they can be like, oh, actually, that seems really close to what I normally have on my grocery list, but I've never thought of having food that way. And I think this recipe definitely falls into that category because they're just donuts after all. But for me, mandazi carries so many memories of mornings in the family home, especially when we have big occasions like weddings or big celebrations, where in the morning would be my grandma or whoever wakes up first, just to have a little special treat for everyone. We'll make a nice big batch of mandazi to serve along with the morning cup of chai. Like all dishes, there's good version and bad version of mandazi, and with this dish, I think the best ones, honestly, I've never had in a restaurant. They have to be made at home with love and care, because if the dough is not soft, they're hard, and there's no great joy associated with having a hard mandazi. So once this dough is softened together, I'm just going to dust a clean countertop with flour. We're going to shape it out. These mandazis are definitely something that I've interpreted from the way my family makes it. I, grew up in California and spent my summers in Kenya, so I grew up with so many culinary cultures. I think when I first started working in food media, my initial thing was, where does my culture fit in the food that I make? And being born in California and having summers in Kenya, I very much grew between two very different culinary cultures. I had, my grandma teaching me on our family ranch in the mountains of, rural Kenya, where true Maasai lands, teaching me how to do dishes the old school way. There were no grocery stores really. It was just having what we had at home and then what they were selling in the local market. But then I go back to California and have more options, but also different options. So even though it seemed like, oh, you can make anything because you have these giant grocery stores, it was different. And I learned really much later into my professional career, when I finally try to find a place for where my food fit in, is it's not trying to replicate what they're making at home or trying to abandon my culture identity, but understanding that they coexist and there's intersectionality when it comes to food. And that realization was incredibly liberating, knowing that the food as I knew it and as I saw it was just as fine as the traditional recipes that they were making back home and, the more American dishes my neighbors were making. And I think that's really important to keep with food, and something that we believe a lot in Jaconi is that all the perspectives of food make sense. They're all valid because you're cooking it and you're eating it, and therefore that's what makes it real. It's really no more complicated than that, or it shouldn't be more complicated than that. But food inherently has always been very political around, who gets to make what and who gets to be an ambassador for what. And I'm a firm believer that everyone should be their own ambassador for the cuisine that they see, and should have the voice and authority to share it as they see fit. So these mandazi are very much to that. My grandma doesn't make these with coconut milk. She doesn't put cardamom. I don't even think sometimes she puts cinnamon. But through my travels between, running around Kenya and just how I like to make food, these mandazi are a version that represent the way I cook and the lens of which I see things, having grown up between multiple cultures. And I think for that, they are all the more delicious. And that's all that matters, right? As long as the food tastes good, we all should be happy. So I'm just cutting these up into squares. I think the mandazi that we typically make at home are triangles, and that's because of the cookware situation. We don't have a standing kitchen traditionally in Maasai culture where you're standing up and you're rolling on a big board. My grandma has a small little round board where she sits on, and it's only this big. And so it makes more sense if that's your cutting board that you're gonna roll out your dough to that size. So she'll divide this dough into little balls, and then each of those little balls roll into a circle and then cut those into wedges. It's reflective of her board. So even though aesthetically it's nostalgic, for me, I'm cooking standing up. It's how I've always cooked, and I much rather roll out my dough in one go than in 3 tiny little ones. So sometimes I'll do it that other way for nostalgia, but it sets a practicality and what makes sense for the way I cook. Rolling it out and then just cutting it into squares makes sense for my kitchen. So when it comes to a question of whether freedom has a taste, the answer is yes, but taste varies so greatly for people. For me, freedom interprets as no bounds. I think growing up in such a country like the US where there's so many cultural identities, it's very easy to feel misplaced if you can't clearly see where your spot is. And I think the power of community, the power of social media has allowed people to create their own places. Whether that place is just your friends and your family who are able to truly do on, or thousands of people who find what you're doing. But I think for me, the biggest freedom I've sensed through food is being able to just make what I'm interested in, make what's true to me, make what I want, make what I find to be delicious, food that reminds me of great memories through visiting family and travels, and being able to share that and then not worrying about much from there. That's the true freedom that I think still on the journey of, because I think once you put things out into the world, there's still a judgment, but I think the idea that I can create and fortunately have built a space to create, that's my freedom. 100%. It's just having the space to do whatever the heck you want to do. And in this case right now, it's making these little mandazis, which are incredibly beautiful. You can even see the flecks of cardamom inside of the dough. Because for me, I have a great dedication to flavor. I like flavor, you can see. So I'm just gonna fry these over.
There we go.
So these are all fried up, and you have to eat mandazi warm. There's no world where you'll ever want to have a cold mandazi. And there's one little touch where I add a little bit of Americano on it. Because like I said, they remind me, they look like beignets, and I think the most fun part of a beignet is that powdered sugar topping, and I think mandazi deserve to have a little bit of fun too. So I intentionally make my dough a little less sweet, just so at the end I can go in with a round of powdered sugar. It's not traditional, but it's delicious, and of course, it's beautiful, and we eat with our eyes first. And all that's left to do is give it a try. Asante sana, and thanks for watching. Oh my God. I'm telling you, my grandma will be proud of these ones. Bye.
I can't wait to welcome you to our Freedom Festival, July 8th through the 9th, through the 29th, for what I promise you is the official Hot Girl Femme Summer.